on here. Should be a fun little slate. We have all sorts of goodness ahead of us. It's a 3-gamer, so that gives us a little more of a lean talking about what is going on with the larger contests or the 3-game slate, as opposed to focusing more when we have the 2-gamers. We get a lot more of the showdown contests. So tonight there's really not that many showdown contests. But I've got this information up, so I just want to let everybody know what's kind of out there. We will talk about the games. We'll highlight them. We won't go into super in depth, but we'll hit all of the key things that you need. But on these shorter slates, a lot of times it's built up with lineup construction strategy. Plus, we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the main slate and if we're going to change any of our late slate lineups. So, your old pal EMac, Terry McBride. You've got, was this just a 2-show day, or did you sneak in the third one here somewhere?
2-show day, but I also wrote 2 columns today, and I was awake at 6:30 or whenever Josh went on for his show, hanging out with him and doing the morning minutes and all of that stuff. So it's been a long day, but happy to be here for the Late Slate show, enjoying a tasty beverage and hanging out with you. And ready to talk shop on this stuff, talk through some fantasy cruncher stuff. Going to the main slate real quick. I don't know where you wanted to start, but I'll grab the ball. Did you make any changes with that Devin Vassell news?
I did not, because I was busy prepping and doing a bunch of other stuff, and I was fixing hockey lineups because 2 cheap scrubs that were on the top line for Nashville were out, and on DraftKings, one was a center and one was a forward, and they were both under $2,800. So I needed to re-crunch. There was really no swap going back into those guys, so I was working on that. But that's just one nice thing that we have here, is that came across our premium Slack chat in the hockey channel. So I was able to go fix my lineups. I had about 7% of each of those guys. So it helped me out. And, then I save a little money. Now, basketball, I went a little bit heavier on some of the later games. I did not feel the need to make a lot of pivots tonight. I didn't really have any Devin Vassell. Who did he end up starting for? Was he the winner of the Lonnie Walker lottery?
That's what it looked like in the start. So I just basically swapped their minutes, and it made him pretty relevant, and I liked him a little bit better because he wasn't getting any of the attention that Lonnie was getting, through the afternoon, as a guy who might be, when we thought he was going to be getting, his full run of minutes. People were asking about him. He was getting attention. I always love to jump on a change like that for a late swap when we get the chance, where it's a guy who's, not going to be owned except for people who do that. So I thought it was a pretty strong spot to jump on. And when I went into Cruncher, just to talk through that real quick, I always load up the optimizer, and then I make sure to tweak some of my settings. So I take it down. Usually I have a pretty broad. Some of the other guys use 1 unique. I like to do 3 or 4 uniques and get a pretty broad swap, and then let my Excel bring it down to the key list of core plays. But when I do a late swap like that, I always change it back to 1, because I want to hew as close to the optimal as possible. If I'm going to bother to change it, I want to change it and take full advantage of that. So I always do that. I always bump up the minimum salary that I get. And then I try and steer it toward, making sure that I'm actually optimizing, particularly when we're grabbing use of like a $3,600 guy like Vassell was.
Yeah, and normally if I only had that one thing going on, I would work on that. But I was also trying to front load some of my content for tomorrow. And then I see them asking in chat, did I make tennis lineups? Why, yes, I did. I have a tennis lineup for the 8:15 slate that already started. And then I've got one for, I think it's 12:15 or whatever it might be. I've got late slate hockey and showdown hockey. I've got, and then tiers and classic on DK for the late slate here for basketball. No slates off, but we've got some free content for you guys today, so I'm going to drop that in. The one you guys are really going to want to see is the NBA rankings, so that'll be pretty helpful. We also have the PGA ownership projections, so I think that contest goes off tomorrow. I'll have to double check. So I'm in a season-long pool, one and done, where you pick them, and my buddy just emailed me, and he's like, hey, are you going to make your pick? I'm like, wait, what? It's not time. And he goes, yeah, it starts tomorrow. And so then I started thinking tomorrow was Thursday until we went on air. And I'm like, it's still Tuesday. So I need to fix that. But I'll drop those PGA ones in there. And then we also have the NHL top stack. There's 3 games tonight at 10 o'clock. So if you want to just kind of see what the top stack tool looks like for that, even if you're not playing, you'll see that it's very, very helpful. And it's, I basically just use our tools, build my lineups, and I'm off to the races. I haven't watched very much hockey at all this season. It's usually not my first sport. Never had it or state of Washington. We didn't have a hockey team. So I've adopted the Capitals since I've been out here, but not that ardent of a fan.
All right.
There we go. So let's get into the basketball, Terry.
Now, when they open that, before we get to basketball, real quick, when they open that Seattle franchise, I think it's next year. Are you going to be jumping on that bandwagon, or are you going to be sticking with your Washington Capitals?
They're the Kraken, I believe, is what their name is going to be. That sounds pretty cool. I will probably root from afar, sort of like I do with the Mariners these days. I had to kind of adopt the Nationals because the games are just on too darn late for me.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
I'll catch
them until 1:30.
Yeah, I'll catch it. Yeah, once I moved out here, well, the Mariners haven't made the playoffs since like 2002. I have a friend who's a Texas Ranger fan who does a lot of whining about this. Yes, Tyler, that would be you. The Mariners haven't been to the postseason in 20 years. So yeah, I adopted the Nationals when I moved out here. I recognized bad baseball when I saw it. I'm like, oh, I can watch this 3 hours earlier. Lovely. All right.
Now, that would be shocking that didn't land you on the Orioles. But yeah, let's get into basketball. Let's do it.
All right. So first game we're going to talk about is Orlando at Portland. We have 220 over under, 6-point home favorites is Portland. The key things that we want to know about this is they're coming back home from a 5-game road trip. That would have been a 6-game road trip, but their game in Charlotte on Sunday was postponed. So, and Damian Lillard did not play on Thursday when somehow a very shorthanded Portland team won in Philly. So interesting road trip that we have. But point being, most of them are relatively well rested. They've got a matchup tonight against Orlando, who will be without Evan Fournier, Michael Carter-Williams, who hasn't played in better part of a month, Aaron Gordon, obviously still out, Jonathan Isaac out for most of the season, and Markelle Fultz is out. Whole point on this, their defense has been horrible. Over their last 10 games, I believe they're giving up 116 points per 100 possessions. That's 5th worst in the league. We like Portland. What's going on with Portland? Well, Derek Jones is back in. Nasir Little, I believe, will be out. And then, of course, Yusuf Nurkic and CJ McCollum are also out. Derek Jones kind of tweaks things a little bit because he's been out for a while. And in his absence, we've seen that Robert Covington and Gary Trent Jr. have gotten more secure minutes, Carmelo Anthony as well. They've sort of tried to stagger those guys a little bit just to make up to have their lack of offense, but we'll see what happens with Derek Jones. I don't really want to play him tonight because I don't know what his minutes will be, but he's going to muck up everybody else. What's your read on this game, Terry, other than play Nurkic? Or pardon me, play Vucevic. Yeah. And if you're not playing Vucevic, good God, Embiid. Oh, we'll get to that one. What do you like from our first game here?
Yeah, very much on the Vucevic train, particularly once we get into this night slate on the FanDuel side of things where you're only going one center. I would imagine if I was putting in 150 of these, it would probably be 100% him. Maybe I would stretch it a little bit just to get different, but I think he's the clear leverage play on this slate, the clear guy to muscle up on. On the other side of things, I really think it is very much the Dame show. Get to him, get him as much as you can on this slate where you're only dealing with 3 games. He's going to be most likely to be one of the potential ceiling plays of the day. Everyone else, to your point, I think is going to be impacted by Derek Jones returning to the lineup, where we just don't know exactly how those minutes are going to get distributed. They were a little bit funky with using like Melo as a small ball 5 and doing some weird things like that, moving Covington around a little. So I just don't really trust that Melo's going to get a full run or that Robert Covington's going to see 32 instead of 28, 26, which would make a difference for him. I wouldn't play Derek Jones until we know what he's going to look like. So a lot of these other guys, Gary Trent in that bucket as well, just aren't really bouncing in for me. They're on a small slate. They're going to be in lineups. They're going to be relevant if you're running a full slate, but they wouldn't be my core guys that I'm, really stretching to try and get to or trying to force more of on any of those guys except Dame.
On for this particular game, and I know I see somebody asking in chat, and I saw on the earlier show when you and Spags were talking about it, FanDuel power forwards. You guys said it was pretty crappy, or everybody was like squarely appropriately priced on the main slate. We're now without 8 other teams. We've got 6 left. What looks good? Anybody from this game? I can't think of any off the top of my head because Covington would be the one I'm thinking of, and we just and or Anthony, and we just mentioned why they may not be the best. I who is even the power forward at this point for Orlando?
Yeah, I mean, from this game, I would say it would be Covington if I had to, gun to my head, pick a power forward. I think he's got the best shot of producing some upside. He's got a reasonably good median projection. I just didn't like the price. I think it was, like you said, it was basically dead on, kind of like what we specified. And none of those guys, not a single power forward on the main slate, was coming near what the target score needed to be for them. So I was actually about to rerun a target score for this specific slate. We have our ownership up for this slate, so I can do that. So let me get into that, and I'll see if we can get a better answer that way. But just pulling up the power forwards real quick, just eyeballing it. I mean, there's always Jason Tatum, and he's the only guy that's reasonably close to anything you would call a star. And everybody else on this slate, outside of Covington, and maybe if you want to throw Bagley into the upper tier, is basically a replacement level player. I mean, Royce O'Neal's probably the third best guy on that list. Then you're getting into the Gary Clarks, the Kem Birches of the world, Daniel Theis, but I don't think he's going to get enough run to be, incredibly relevant other than, he's a 4,900, 4,800 guy. So he'll be in play, but he's a cog in the machine. He's not a standout pick. So really it's, Jason Tatum on the upside, but we're getting Jaylen Brown back. That rotation is whole. We like Kemba Walker. There's only so much usage to go around. So, there's nobody that really, really jumps off the page for FanDuel power forward. But if I had to pick out of the entire group, which we do, Jason Tatum would be in a pretty good swath of my lineups.
All right, I see News God dropping in chat here. He was saying that Derek Jones won't no real restricted minutes. I had not realized that he came back on Saturday. I think that when is the 6th?
Was he back
Saturday or was that Sunday? The 6th was Saturday. Was that an earlier game or something? New York and Portland. For some reason that one just isn't resonating with me. So apologies for that. But yes, indeed, Derek Jones did come back. He played the end of the first quarter into the second, and then basically an identical stretch.
And Melo ended up playing. Fourth. Yeah, and that was the game where it was weird. Melo played like 16 minutes. Yeah, I remember.
And he was playing with Derek Jones. Yeah, so it looks like Covington was the one that got most. I'm just trying to see how it lines up here. It looks like a combination of Covington. Jones was covering for a combination of Covington, Hood, and Lillard. It looks like they were doing quite a few changes and some staggering, so it's kind of hard to tell what old Terry Stotts was doing there for sure. But the starters all played the vast majority of the fourth quarter. So kind of tough to tell what's going on from there. Now, and just because Jones has been out for so long, if we go look back at his game logs, he last played, so he played Saturday, but prior to that he hadn't played since the 28th, so he missed 4 games, and that changes a lot. So I'm not as nuanced in what they're doing here with the rotation. So these guys are going to sort of be afterthoughts, and the strategy we want to think about here on the shorter slates is, who do we feel are going to be in the closing lineups? And that's where a lot of times you can get some nice runs. So someone like Frank Kaminsky, someone that doesn't, even though if he gets a start, he's not always going to make the closing lineup because they have DeAndre Ayton. And if the other team goes small, who's going to play, Ayton or Kaminsky? Well, Kaminsky's going to lose out, right? So you kind of want to know the different situations. Mm-hmm. Then you got to worry about blowout run. Is your team way ahead? Is your team way behind? There's a ton of variables. But for starters, it's always helpful to know who is probably going to be out there in the fourth, because there's nothing worse, Terry, than your guy going to the bench midway through the third. And that's all she wrote.
Never coming back. That would be the story of Keldon Johnson a couple times in recent games, which was a big point of contention about his value on today's slate. But we don't have to worry about him for this slate. But that would be exactly to that point. He wasn't getting fourth quarter run, and it impacts the upside. It impacts the ceiling ability.
All right. Rocky Patel asks the key question. We'll use this to kind of get on out of this game, but I'm going to take a minute with it because it's Frank Mason III. This was kind of the co-Fred Van Elite guy way back when they were rookie and first year guys. He has bounced around the league a fair amount. So he was a second round, and I'm going to tell you all this because he's not some young guy who's got a bunch of talent. He sort of is that Fred Van Elite guy. He's 5'11". He's not very tall. He was really good at Kansas, but he was there for 4 years. So here's kind of the thoughts on him. So his playing time was really sporadic his first couple years, but he averaged, when he was getting somewhat consistent playing time, he averaged almost a fantasy point per minute. So he was 2 years with the Kings, and then his issue was he was having trouble guarding the larger guards in the Western Conference. So that was kind of a problem. So they were like, yeah, we've got plenty of other guys here. We're going to let you go. So he hooked up with Milwaukee. And this is, by the way, even though he was an all Big Ten defensive player his junior year, or Big 12. So he caught on with the Bucks last year, played a handful of games with them, but played with their G League team. By the way, led him to the championship, and he was the G League MVP. Wow, pretty cool. Good stuff there. At the end of the abbreviated training camp, Philadelphia I forget how it works in the G League, but more or less they kind of claimed him to be on their three guys that are sort of their reserves. However, at the beginning of February, which is now just last week, Orlando said, we're going to give him a two-way contract. So that's kind of how it works in the G League. You have your affiliated teams, but other teams, if they give someone a two-way contract, it kind of becomes their guy unless you don't need to get into that. But the whole point is they let go of Jordan Bone for him. So he's in here now. Now, what are we going to do with that? Well, I don't know, but he's pretty darn cheap on all the sites. I think 16 minutes is solid. I think 20 is realistic. Anything over 20, I don't know what's going to happen. So he's only appeared with them for 2 games. Last game, he played the entire fourth quarter and blowout run. So I'm not really sure what's going to happen there. He did play about 5 minutes together with Cole Anthony, which is the key, because otherwise he's just going to be Anthony's direct backup. Full point here, Anthony has been playing a lot more minutes, so he's playing about 30 minutes a game. There may only be 16 or 18 for Mason, but I do like him as a discount dandy. So I want to call that out because he's going to be a key linchpin in me getting to the Embiids, the Vucevic's, the Lillards, the Simmons, etc. Any thoughts on that, or you want to kind of move on to our next topic?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot more sense on this slate than it did on the earlier slate.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Certainly not.
He may not come in until the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second.
Right. And that's kind of where I had him all day, in that 16 to 18 minute range. I wasn't really buying into it. But for the shorter slate, you only have 3 games. There's only so much to go around. So he is one of your guys that has that potential to, if he gets 22, 24 somewhere in there, he could pay that price off pretty nicely. So I don't mind it as much as I did earlier. I think I kind of badmouthed him a little bit earlier. But just taking a look at, where he needs to be based on my numbers, I just ran it through the solver here. So we've got him, at least in my last update, Alex had him projected for 17.4 FanDuel points. Everything I talk about with points is going to be FanDuel. I had him at 18.07, so a little bit better than Alex did. And I have him needing to deliver for this slate for a 400-point total. He needs to deliver 30 points at that salary at 3,600. I have him achieving that 2.72% of the time. Alex's number 2.13% of the time. Based on his ownership that we have, which was 7.9%, that puts him at a negative leverage. His implied would be a little bit under that. So food for thought. He's not necessarily as shiny a value play, at least on FanDuel, as he might look like, but I do think he is in play.
Yeah. Now, that 400-point total, is that adjusted, or is that proportional or adjusted down for the shorter slates in what you're doing?
That is for this slate.
Okay.
Yeah, that's for this slate. I do it the old-fashioned way that Josh used to do it, where you're just basically taking the optimal total and then multiplying by 1.25, and you're getting around what the slate should be total.
The slate winning.
And it typically comes into the 390 to 425 range.
Okay. Cool. All right. Key things that we want to know.
Am I breaking up in transmitting to you? Because I'm getting some delay here.
Yes, that would be an affirmative.
I'm good? Okay.
Well, no, you're breaking up, but now you're good. Breaking up is hard to do, they say. Okay.
Oh, I am breaking up.
Pin tweet giveaway here. Drop that in chat for you guys.
I'm going to close one of these crunching windows.
Yes, probably not run the Monte Carlo solver. May help you. So check out our pin tweet here at awesemo.com to enter the NBA giveaway. We're giving away a full free year tonight for the question is Jason Tatum or Donovan Mitchell. Who scores more points? If you answer that correctly, you'll be put in a drawing to win an entire year of Awesemo NBA content. That's one full calendar year. So you'll get, through the end of this year, and then you're going to circle back and get the beginning of next year as well. So check that out. Easy way to get in for one full year of Awesemo NBA. Our next game, Terry, we're going to turn you loose on this one. We've got Philly at Sacramento, 4.5 point underdog, home dogs for Sacramento, 232 over under. Mike Scott is out. No other key injury news that I'm worried about. Embiid is awesome. Seth Curry, revenge. It's kind of a West Coast revenge tour. He's only hitting 2 of the 3 places he played, and he's not going against his brother. But hey, we'll call this a revenge tour. And then who's the other guy? Oh, yeah, Ben Simmons. The floor is yours. Break this down. Both sides. Paint the town.
Both sides. All right. It's a game where I think in this slate, it's going to be more relevant than it was in the earlier slate. I wasn't getting to a ton of this game for the early one, and I'm just trying to figure out why. That's why. I had it sorted for power forwards from the FanDuel slate, and I couldn't figure out how to get back to it. So yeah, I think this is much more relevant. Obviously, on a shorter slate, we're going to need some of these guys. So I think Joel Embiid definitely stands out on the slate as a potential center option. On FanDuel, I'm still preferring Vukovic. I think I would probably strongly lean into that. But on DK, where you can get to both of them with some of that emerging value that we talked about, I think that might be a good foundation to just kind of put those two in blindly and then build from there. So I would be looking at some of that. It's an expensive play for sure, but I think there's probably enough value on the board to do it. And then on the Sacramento side, I definitely think Fox is in play. Very solid going into the earlier slate. 1.17 fantasy point per minute producer. Got him on the board for 35-minute projections. So, getting his full run, leading that offense. Beyond him, Barnes is definitely in play. Buddy Hield, as much as I don't love it, is in play. I mentioned Bagley in the power forward discussion earlier. He's another play that just kind of makes me shudder a little bit. I don't love getting to him, but on the short slate, these guys are going to be relevant options. So I think there's a lot to get to in this game. And then just in some crunches that I ran earlier, I was getting some shares of Seth Curry. I think he's a little bit relevant. Definitely getting to some Tobias. I was getting to a little bit less Ben Simmons just because the spend up money at point guard was going to the Lillard side of things, and I wasn't getting a ton of lineups with both of them on FanDuel. But I think on DK, that might change a little bit with his multi-position eligibility and the 8,400 price tag as opposed to 91 point guard only on FanDuel.
All right. Danny Green, question mark. That's from the premium Slack chat. That little bit better price than Harrison Barnes. Harrison Barnes has had some nice game logs lately. However, I always get him wrong. What do you like about Danny Green, if anything?
Yeah, he was coming up for me in a few crunches. I'm just trying to see if I can jump over to my numbers here. Yeah, so I've got him 3,700 on FanDuel, very much in play at the small forward spot. He escaped my notice on the other one because it was outdated from the boom bust from the earlier slate. So with the slate that I put it together, I have a 23-point projection, so a little bit higher than Alex does. It's one of our more distant outliers where we were different today. But I've got him coming up in around 12% hitting his target score, which at the position, if I'm right, is second. If Alex is right, he's about half of what my number was, but that still would rank him about third, maybe fourth. So I think he's in play either way. Whether I'm right or Alex is right, you're talking about a 3-point delta in the median projection. You basically want him to hit 30. You're going to need him to make a couple threes. But I think a 30-point night is very much in play for Danny Green. I don't think it's completely insane. And there are guys from whom we would be asking more to hit their target scores, I think, than Danny Green.
All right. Reminder, guys, we do have in NBA NASCAR content over here. We've got the shootouts. We're starting tonight. The challenges, of course, Daytona right around the corner here. I used our projections tonight because, no slates off, Terry. Was just screwing around, reminding myself of what settings I use in Fantasy Cruncher. We'll talk a little bit about basketball settings at Fantasy Cruncher here for the back half of the show. I know some people were asking about that on the main show, and we have a little bit more time here. Also, we want to get some likes because get us to 75 likes, and I'll go downstairs and see if there's a beer in my fridge so I can join Terry. There may not be, and I don't really want to come back up here with one of the 2 Trulies that's been sitting there since August. But that may be the choices. Get us to 75 likes. We'll go see what I can rummage and find in the fridge here. But we do have all sorts of content out here at Awesemo. So we've got college basketball. That's in front of the paywall right now. It's in beta, but that's going to be. It's the I played that today too. They're going to be probably going premium soon, but definitely check that out. I don't think they're available anywhere else. They've allowed me to get about a 10% ROI, and all I'm doing is just putting some lineups in here or there, playing the smaller contests with the better payout structure and smaller smaller dollar amounts, but it's fun to have a little bit of excitement just checking out what's going on with the different sports. Third game, and we'll circle back with questions, and you guys can even ask construction stuff and sort of 2v2s if you really want to, because this game, not overly exciting. Boston at Utah favored by 6.5. And then we've got 220.5 over under. So key things for Boston is Marcus Smart is out. Kemba Walker is active. Jaylen Brown is active. I haven't seen if he's got a minutes restriction on him. He's been dealing with the sore knee. He missed a couple games. And then for Utah, Mike Conley is out nursing a hamstring injury. The only guys that really sort of stand out to me, and I don't even know that stand out is the right word, if I got them on my lineups, I wouldn't be sad about Kemba. I wouldn't hate Tatum. And I really like Joe Ingles. Joe Ingles disappointed just a little bit in his last game, but we want to remember, since Mike Conley has joined the Utah Jazz, when he is he being Ingles is actually has the second best assist rate with the team. Conley's number one, and then even when it's no Conley, Ingles moves to number one, Mitchell's still number two. So that's something not a lot of people remember, is that Ingles kind of can contribute a little bit of everything. So that's something that's very helpful with him. His upside exists if he's hitting his three. If he's not, we're going to see about 17 fantasy points. If he knocks down a few extra shots, we see 27 fantasy points. That's kind of the range of outcomes here. What do you like from this game, Terry?
Yeah, I mentioned Ingles on the earlier show, and very much in that context of, all right, this is a guy who can contribute in other ways, and I always like getting to guys like that who aren't totally scoring dependent. But to your point, yeah, he's going to need to knock down a couple shots to really get over the hump for where we need him to be. I've got him on FanDuel needing about 34 points to pay off that 400-point target. If we come in at 390 or so for the Slate winner, then he needs to only really need to be around a little over his median projection. So he's definitely very much in play still on this slate. You mentioned Kemba. He was coming up a lot for me on the main slate. I love that price on Kemba Walker. I know he hasn't been really playing up to his potential or who we know he is, but when we get a guy who hasn't really seen a change of role, maybe he's coming back off an injury like Kemba is, and is gradually increasing his minutes, but the sites are pricing him down because he hasn't been producing for what they expect from him. And keep in mind, a lot of times there's an intern in the closet making these prices, apparently, based on where they land. I think 5,700 on FanDuel is just way too cheap for Kemba Walker and the potential for upside from him. So I've got him getting to his 40-point target like 22% of the time. I think he's a monster play, particularly on the small slate. So definitely want to get to a lot of Kemba.
How are you feeling about maybe a Rudy Gobert going against really nobody in that? I guess Tristan Thompson, but he's the thing that always shocks me about Tristan Thompson is when he and LeBron were playing on the same team. Sometimes at first glance, I would not be sure who was who. That Tristan Thompson doesn't look like a center by any stretch. LeBron obviously huge, but Thompson not so much.
Yeah, it's a matchup Rudy Gobert could definitely dominate. That said, he's a guy who just, for whatever reason, I don't get to a ton. And a lot of times it just has to do with the other options on FanDuel. So I feel like if I played more on DraftKings, I would be landing on Gobert a lot more often. And I think that holds true tonight where, I just want to get to more Vooch rather than, take a swing on Rudy, who is more likely to come in around his median score than he is the 50-plus points that we need from him, where Vooch I expect to come in around the ceiling score that we need from him. Like, I think that is very much a reasonable expectation, where I'd be kind of surprised if Rudy was in that mid-50s range. Not shocked, fall out of my chair, kind of surprised by any means. He's got a nice projection. He's very much in play. And, for the probability of hitting the target score that I have, he doesn't look good in comparison to the ownership because I've only got it happening like 3% of the time versus 8% ownership. So that doesn't really jibe. But if you bump him up by a few points or you expect a little bit more from him, then yeah, of course he makes sense. And on a short slate, I never mind playing anybody who you would consider a star. Just if you want to take all the data and all of anything out of it, if you're getting to a guy who has a solid median projection, like a star level player, like a Rudy Gobert, you're probably at center where you only get one of them on FanDuel, sacrificing a little bit of upside in your overall lineup. But I don't totally hate making that decision just based on that, if that's the way you approach it.
All right. Reminder, everybody, drop the link into the YouTube chat. We do have free rankings today. We can just look for the 6 teams that are playing tonight. It'll be proportional, but it'll give you a little bit of an idea of what we've got going on here. We do have a lot of late slate content. I don't know of any other sites that are doing late slate projections. Key things that you want ownership projections. So if you want to get in on that, you can get all of the great Awesemo content and tools for nearly every sport out there. You want to do the weekly pass, gets you all access to everything. That's $29.95. Definitely the way to go. If you want just the NBA weekly pass, that's $16.95. There's no promo code. That's just the regular price. So that works out to just over $2 a day. If you're playing $100-200 a day, well worth it to have our content. It's definitely going to be a difference maker. It may not make you be a smash, take 10 trips to the bank player, but it'll help you stop hitting that redeposit button, which is key. You want to stretch your dollars, your bankroll as long as you can, because you want to be alive for the night when you do construct that perfect lineup and you do make a nice 4-figure score. So that's very important. You got to get ready for that. But $16.95 a week to get in for all of the NBA content that we have, which includes the late slate stuff. All right, let's see. What do we want to do now? What is your key takeaway that now that we've kind of walked through these teams here? Is there sort of your top 3 or 4 most likely players to end up in your lineup if you're going to build 10 or 20 lineups? You can do from the FanDuel side, and I'll talk about the DK side.
Probably Vooch for sure. Like I said, he would most likely, if I was entering 150 lineups on FanDuel, I wouldn't lock him, but he would just through my process probably come up 100% of the time. I think he's that strong a play. The other guys, I would be getting to a lot of Clarkson, although I don't love it. He's a guy I mentioned on the earlier show that I just don't fully trust. I think, I mentioned talking about scoring dependent type guys and preferring to get to guys who can do a little bit with, bolster assist rates, bolster rebound rates. But Clarkson, the price is right, particularly on FanDuel, and I think the numbers align so that I would be getting a pretty massive share of him as well. Lillard, I think, is a no-brainer at the point guard spot in this matchup. You just plug and play with him. And then it would be probably a pretty broad swath of guys, between the Ingles, Kemba, who we talked about, Cole Anthony, who we didn't really address very much, would definitely still be in play. Mm-hmm. And I would be getting a lot of him alongside Lillard as my 2 point guard pairing. Which would be edging out some of the De'Aaron Fox and some of the other point guard options. Ben Simmons comes to mind. I mentioned I wouldn't be getting to a lot of him. That's because I would be getting so much of Kemba and Cole Anthony at 5,700 and 5,400 respectively. So that would basically be, what the top of my board looks like. It jibes pretty well with going by the optimal rates and the boom scores from the previous slate, but pared down to just the guys from this slate. So the optimal is not going to be right, but the boom score is basically right still. That jibes very much with the top of Alex's board as well. So I like what I'd be seeing there if I was entering these lineups.
All right. So similarly for me, it's and I'm going to start to really narrow things down, but running unencumbered crunches here with 50 lineups, I can see that Vucevic, Damian Lillard, Jordan Clarkson are coming in for the top 3. We both agreed with that. Now I've tweaked a few of the other settings, so this is just no ownership caps on it. Danny Green is 3rd or 4th. Frank Mason is 5th. I like all that. You know who didn't come up once, and they're asking about this in chat as well? Joel Embiid. And I wrote him up as the key play today in the free content. So here's why I'm going to go manually make some adjustments to get him. I would like him probably on a 3rd of our lineups. I'll have to go see what our ownership projections are, but I want to come in above the field. Over his last 8 games, Joel Embiid has scored at least 33 points in 7 of those games, with 28 being the low performance. He did miss 2 games in that stretch for injury or rest, but his per appearance averages are 32.6 minutes, 35.3 points, 9.6 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 2.1 combined blocks and steals. And oh, by the way, he's making 3.3 3-pointers per game. Basically, that's about 50 fantasy points, 55 fantasy points per game, depending on your side of choice, the double-double bonuses, the block bonuses, etc. That's pretty darn good. Why is he not showing up for us, Terry?
Because
they say we're hiding him. You cannot hide him.
Because we're trying to deceive the viewers and take advantage of however many hundred of you might be here and completely skew a slate with like thousands of entries. Yes, of course. No, it's because there are other very viable options at the position. For me, just looking at it on the FanDuel side where we're only talking about one center, so it's very different than the DraftKings side, but some of this is still relevant just because of the price and the way that the prices break down. At 10-6, I'm getting Embiid projected for a 50-point night, 50.33. Alex has him at 49.6, which puts him, we need him to get with a 10-6 salary, we would need him to be at 62.49 points. I have him doing that 13% of the time, which isn't bad. Alex's number, it would be 11.63% of the time. The issue is for 8,700, which allows you to do so much more at other spots, you can get Nikola Vucevic, who's projected higher for both of us in raw projection. I have him a little higher than Alex does. I'm at 52.6 and Alex is at 49.7. So Alex has them basically even, but the price difference is immense. So by Alex's number, he's getting 35.4% of the time. So basically triple the amount of time hitting his target score, which is a lower target at 53, of course, because of the lower salary. He's just a better play. And then you can go down in salary. You can get to a guy like Enes Kanter for 7,200. Similar story. It's a little bit higher. It's not as stark as when you compare to Vucevic, but it's also about what else you're doing with that 3,400 savings between Kanter and Embiid. Where you can play multiple centers, it gives Embiid a little bit more breathing room and a little bit more flexibility because you can put him alongside Vucevic and everything. So he gains a little bit there, but some of the other guys do also. So some of those numbers just kind of slide up and he stays in that same kind of position relative to the other guys. So it's not just about how he looks. It's about how he looks relative to everybody else at the position and then what that salary savings does for everyone else relative to the guys at their position. So it's a bigger, more complex problem than just Joel Embiid looks good tonight. Why aren't we playing him?
All right. This one is for Brian Durkee. He says, and if you're playing hockey, Derek Grant is out. Ryan Getzoff is back in. So just a heads up. And
and by the way, we did have news on Jaylen Brown. You mentioned that we hadn't seen News God had him full strength against the Jazz, according to Brad Stevens, per News God. So good to go there if you want him.
Perfect. But we've got, the last three times in Embiid has faced Sacramento, he's got 59, 56, and 63 DraftKings points. Only concern about that last game was just after Thanksgiving in 2019. So he hasn't played him in a while. Just throwing that out there. That said, it's a phenomenal matchup. I'm just yanking your chain a little bit there, but definitely it's a good matchup. Entire team's different, but it's a good matchup.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I never go by team versus team and all those things. Circumstances change so dramatically, but to that point, I know those were DK points, but I have him needing 62 FanDuel points. So I don't know how many times in that he would have cracked that mark, but that's, we need him to have a ceiling game. He's certainly capable of it, and it's a good matchup for it for sure, but he does need to deliver on that high salary.
All right. This is from Jake Kimball in the premium chat. He would like to know, is Royce O'Neal a good power forward play with how bad he qualifies it for us with how bad power forward is tonight on FanDuel?
I would maybe stop short of the word good, but he's a play.
Tolerable?
He is definitely in play. Let me sort this. Jumped over to power forward. So it's insane. I mean,
his last three games, this is DK, 34, 27 minutes. He's scoring about a half a fantasy point per minute. The 3 games prior to that, he had decent games. He's all about getting the steals and maybe taking some shots.
Yeah. Look, for the price, for $5,000 on FanDuel, he actually ranks out fine. He's getting to his target 4.44% of the time, which actually leads this group of power forwards right now in my numbers. So he only needs to get you 36 and change points, and we've got him projected for a median score of 24.3. He could get there, and you're definitely getting him. You'd be owning him a little bit better than the field in that case, and gaining some leverage. It's just uncomfortable. Like it feels better to just say go roster Tatum and Covington, or it's probably Tatum and Covington. Maybe that doesn't feel better. Maybe Royce O'Neal is a better play.
It's short slate.
Analysis for this stuff.
It's one of those where context is really going to be key. I don't think he's out of play, Terry.
Yeah,
by any stretch.
What's his DK price?
I think 51. I closed that screen. Too many windows open.
One of these days I'll build my model out so it actually works with this DK stuff too.
He is 51 on DK, shooting small forward, power forward eligible.
Okay, so you even pick up the position, multi-position eligibility, which I love. Yeah, like him a little bit more even over there, I think. Similar price too.
Let's see here. Embiid. Now, if you guys had the late slate projections, you would know that Embiid is just 18% on DraftKings, and Nikolai Vucevic is the number one player. So there's you can invert those for some serious leverage against the field.
For sure. Yeah, anytime you see that, especially on a short slate, and when you're going to, again, to the clunky point, and the data free point of sometimes you can just go to the star player. When you're on a short slate like that and you see something where it's that much stark ownership, you know that the raw projection, the median projection is there for a guy like Embiid, and you just want to make that call on there's 3 games, there's only so many centers, there's only 2 really viable ones. I want to go with the guy that the public's not going to. You can always kind of justify that on a 3-game slate, regardless, even if the optimizer, the true nature of the slate pushes you in other directions, just because of the wonky nature of a 3-game slate.
All right. You said the magic word optimizer here. So let's talk a little bit about Fantasy Cruncher just to help out some of our viewers. I don't know if the same people that were asking the question that were there, so we'll just kind of keep it at a higher level. So one of the first questions we always get is, I'm pushing optimize and nothing's happening. Well, key thing you need to know is you need to have the player ownership set high enough that you can build enough lineups. So if you have 8 spots on your roster, you would need at a minimum to have your total player pool's exposure caps to be set at least at 800. I would probably set it at least 1,000 at that point. Once you add them all up, you want to remember that for everything you push down below what the field is doing, you need to put something else up, because otherwise, if you just upload the fields as your baseline, which is what I do, you're gonna match the field. And if you go down on a bunch of people but not up, or up on a bunch of people, you can start getting unintended consequences. Part 2.
Clip that.
Yeah, should we clip that?
You go down on a bunch of people.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thank you. Well, if you're not gonna whack something off, then you can do it that way. We've got how many uniques? 1 to 3. What does a unique mean? It means how many players are different from each lineup. So that is something that's key. From that, let's see.
Yeah, and that's one that I like I mentioned earlier. It's come to light recently. I guess some of the guys have switched that up a little bit, and they're doing just going with 1 unique and letting randomness dictate that. So, like I said, I prefer to leave it at like 3 to 4 for a full slate and get a broad look at the entire thing, then cram a bunch of lineups through my process and have it, all come out in the wash. Which I think 4 is a more efficient way to do that, because it forces change through your lineup. But it might also be a little bit over aggressive. Whereas if you're going with 1, you're very much following that path that we talk about of, we want to stay on as direct a path between you and the most optimal construction as possible, while making 1v1, 2v2 changes along the way to other core guys who look good, focusing on unique combinations of guys without ever, walking way off into the woods in either direction, staying on the path. So utilizing fewer uniques is a better way to do that. So it's something I'm debating changing in my process for the full. I want to see how it works out.
All right. Let's see. The other thing that's important to remember is that randomness and uniqueness work together. All it's doing is creating a more diverse player pool. So if you crank the randomness up, what it's doing is, if you have the basic one, say you have a player that's projected for 10 points and you set the randomness level at 20, that means it's just going to pick a number between 8 and 12. And that'll be what it assigns. It'll create a new number for that for each time it's going to calculate a new lineup, but that's not randomizing the median projection. If you have the Fantasy Cruncher Pro, what it does is it forces it more on a natural bell curve. That's the only difference. Neither one's really right or wrong, because a lot of times you'll get, when you start using that bell curve one, if you only use a 10% randomness, you're not going to barely see it. You need to get up to around 25, 30 before you start to see anything. The other thing that'll happen is if you only have 1 or 2 on randomness, it's going to usually switch out your lowest player, your lowest cost player, or your lowest projected player. So that usually means in baseball, your catcher, or your defense, or in basketball, it's just going to pick one of your lowest guys. So you need to understand that if you're only picking one, that's all it's going to change. So you really need to get to 2 or 3 before it's going to do stuff. Now, when you're using these in conjunction on a 2 or a 3 game slate, you may only want 1 or 2 randomness. You may only want that 20%, 20% randomness, 1 or 2 on your uniques. But you need to understand what's going on with your player pool. And then the final tip on that, sort your lineups by their projected score. Invert it. See how many crappy lineups are at the bottom. There's going to be a bunch of them. Delete those and run another crunch, because it's hitting its caps and it's doing what it asks you to do, but you're going to have a bunch of lineups that are very suboptimal. They'll be unique, but they'll be very suboptimal.
Yeah, and there are ways that you can box the lineup constructions into certain ranges. Something that Alex talks about sometimes is running the optimal, say it's a 333 optimal. So use the my rules, my data functions, and create a rule that says, nothing can be below, say, 15 points below where your optimal is. And then it forces everything into that box of construction. You can add a minimum salary to that. You can do different things, but always bear in mind to, come back around to where you started. The more things you build into what you're telling Fantasy Cruncher it has to do, the more restrictions you build in, the more limitations on how much it can use a guy in these various constructions, the fewer lineups it's going to be able to build, the more likely you are to hit that wall where it tells you, I can't build any lineups, or I only was able to build 12, here you go. And now you're a minute before lock and you've only got 12 lineups. So it's very important to work with this stuff, get your settings where you need them, and kind of understand how they work and how they work off of one another. The randomness is one that people tragically misunderstand, I think. And to your point, when you're using the pro randomness where it puts it on a bell curve, that's going to naturally keep you with fewer outliers, which is probably a good thing. But for GPP play, you will get fewer instances of those extreme end guys that are occasionally going to go off, but could be that low-owned addition to your combination of players that would put you over the top on that one chance where he does go off. You're going to hew closer to the optimal, stay on that path a little bit better via staying inside the bell curve, where the other one is truly scattershot randomness. Every single guy gets a score like you talked about where it's between X and Y based on that number, that percentage of the median projection that we put in there. And it's every single player, every single lineup it creates. So you can see the scores that it actually used. If you click the little wheel on your lineup and go to and add random projection used, you can see what it actually used for each guy. So sometimes, depending on what you've got in there, you'll get some wonky stuff like an 85-point night from a guy who's not going to get you 85 points. So you want to be careful of those lineups too, because sometimes that's going to drive you in bad directions if you're using too heavy a randomness.
All right, we got about 12 minutes left here. It's funny how quickly the hour goes. This is another good kind of strategy question. And reminder, we're using these shows. We're kind of finding our way on these formats. We want it to be fun for you guys. We want you to understand different things. If we've got a fun thing that we're sweating out, then hey, let's talk about that. So sort of fun things that sweating out a little bit here. So this is for Baby Seals from our premium Slack. So he's got a pretty good start here on a DraftKings lineup for the main slate. So he's got Wright with 43. He had Grant with 47. He had a nice punt play there with Willie Hernan Gomez at 3% owned. He's at 28 right now. He gave me the screenshot, so some of this could be changing. Then he's got a low owned Jimmy Butler at 51. So he's saying, do I change anything? So here's going to be my answer. So his 3 movable spots are shooting guard, and utility. And he's got Dwayne Bacon, he's got Frank Mason, and he has Damian Lillard. So my answer on this would be no. I don't know where you're going to get additional upside that's different than what you already have. It would be hard to get to Embiid because you're going to have to go down from either Mason or Bacon and replace out Lillard. So I don't feel great about that. I think you're going to be unique enough with your, was Wright really only 11% owned? Wow. I guess when he's 6,000, that didn't excite a lot of people. I think that along with Hernan Gomez and DeMar DeRozan are going to get you relatively unique enough in the 5% Jimmy Butler. So now you want to say, of those three spots, shooting guard, guard, and utility, what is my most optimal plays in those? I would have either Lillard or Vooch in that utility spot. I personally would play Frank Mason. And then the question becomes, what can you do with that extra money for shooting guard? I'd probably still stay with Bacon, in my opinion. But these are good questions to ask. But you want to say, now if you had been super chalk with everything, then maybe you would want to go a little bit different, right? Because you might want to try to break away from the rest of the pack. But these are the questions you got to ask yourself.
Yeah, and especially at that point of the night, I think like you said, you've got enough low-owned multipliers in there when we run the ownership product of that lineup. That Willie Hernangomez is going to drive it well off into the weeds as far as other people potentially having it. Somebody might have it, but you're not going to tie with 10 people. You're going to tie with one. So you'd be fine just running it as is. And like you're saying, I'm just trying to scan it as you were talking through. I couldn't find it in Slack to actually look at it while you were talking. But I think that most of those were probably the right spot. I agree. It makes sense to stick with Lillard. I don't think you could get to Embiid for that flex spot anyway without really, really sacrificing and going down to somebody just totally unplayable below Bacon. Maybe if it had been earlier when we could have gotten Devin Vassell, I don't know what his price was on DK, but if he had been super cheap, maybe that would have worked out. But you don't want to go to I'm just looking for you don't want like a Korkmaz, you don't want like a Teague, I don't think. Shake Milton. I don't think there's anybody who's justifiable. Like if I'm sitting here kind of just trying to figure out a way to even justify any of these, it's probably not going to be a good play. Seth Curry is 100 more than Bacon, so you're changing your price upward. I like Seth Curry a little bit better than Dwayne Bacon, but I don't think that's any kind of mandatory change. And similar rates, Bacon projected for a little bit more run. Yeah, I think you're probably good. I think I would stick.
Yeah, and that's the thought exercise that you want to go through. So you're asking all the right questions. The other thing you want to remember too is there's still three games. So that means that there's 6 teams playing. That's a lot of the player pool out there. And we know that Lillard and Vooch are going to be two of the more popular people, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of the tournament players are really looking to get over the field on the Embiid and Simmons side. So there's a lot of game left. We're really just barely halfway through the slate right now, so it's kind of hard to tell what your positioning is. I like your chances though, for at least something more than a min cash, something in that 2x, 3x. And hey, maybe you get a runner and pop up there for, $100.
There you go.
All right. I have 6 minutes to put in my lineups. They didn't make very many late slate contests here on DK. I was just playing the smaller ones. So I'm going to be able to do this very quickly because I only have 40 lineups. So no biggie there. I'm just going to change a few percentages.
Where'd you end up on your various exposures?
I don't know yet. That's the part I have to do real quick. But if you want to see if there's any good questions in chat, well, I've got my nose buried on this. We can talk through it.
I don't know if anybody's hanging out with us. And somebody asked, let's see, Lillard, Bacon, Seth Curry, or Barnes, Anthony Clarkson. This question's from a long time ago. I would probably go with the Lillard, Bacon, Seth Curry side of that. Going through premium Slack, trying to get to the bottom of it. Boy, there was a lot built up in here that I just was not on top of. Maybe I can jump to the YouTube channel. Guys, forgive me if you get a little crosstalk for half a second here while I pull up our YouTube chat here and see if anybody's asking good questions in YouTube. I don't want to say it would be a first. By the way, we're at 86 thumbs up, and I didn't see you go.
I forgot. All right. Well, maybe we'll let me get my lineups in, and I'll go grab a beer, and we can talk about we'll talk about what happened with the lock.
Yeah, for sure. Eric Johnson in YouTube asks, EMac, can you play Ingles and Mitchell in the same lineup? I think
yes, absolutely. They'll play together. They'll close together. That's the key thing.
Yep.
And they won't impede each other.
People talking about officially fading Lillard. I do wish you luck because I think that is a mistake. If you have time to change it, I would. Zion is using it. That's not a question. Somebody says Zion is using his weight to hold down the bench from escaping.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. 97 is a lot for Jason Tatum. I agree with that. But again, short slate, there's only so many guys that you can actually spend your salary on. And at a certain point, you do need raw points. And he is one of the better options for just flat out raw points at that power forward spot, particularly on FanDuel. Bagley, not a guy I love. We weren't giving him a great minutes projection. But, again, short slate was in play. Similar with Buddy Hield, another guy who I never loved getting to, but was in play. I can jump over to my actual numbers here, so I'm not just giving an opinion. I have Bagley projected on FanDuel at 4,800 for 23.09. Alex had him at 22.3, so it's a little bit more bullish than the boss. But we need him to get to 35.87, which I have him doing under 4% of the time. Alex has him doing a little bit less than that. Still getting decent leverage on him, even with 25% ownership on this slate, despite that, because, again, this position just sucks tonight and sucks on this slate in particular. So you're not paying much to get to him. I just don't know, like, if you're rostering, let's say you roster Bagley and O'Neal at the power forward spots, you can go to Vooch, you can go to Damian Lillard, and you still have a boatload of money to spend. So I just don't know if we're spending on money efficiently if we don't put Tatum at one of those power forward spots on FanDuel specifically.
Yeah, and it's we've talked about this on a lot of shows, but now that we have more time, we can kind of really get into the game within the game. It really, and old friend of ours, Fast Eddie Fear, was always good at talking about this. You got to treat it as it's 5 different choices within the choices, and Rinpack and Josh are very, very good, and obviously Terry as well are very, very good at that. But these are the guys that you can really target those FanDuel questions for, including Terry, because they live and breathe this stuff. And that's the important thing to know is we have all sorts of different voices here at Awesemo that can help you out with what you need. All right, my lineups are uploaded. Chat, did we really get to 75 likes? Oh, we're at 97. Have us at 100 when I get back. I'm gonna go have a beer. Terry, if anything breaks in the next 2 minutes, break it down for him, and then we'll look at some ownership, and then we'll get on out of here. Tyler, you can go get a beer too. Let's
hope that we don't get any breaking news in the next few minutes. But Silver Tuna and Premium Slack wants to know if tonight's going to be Jingles night. I think there's a good shot at that, actually. I was getting through a little bit of Joe Ingles through my lineup process, and he's a guy that I talk about, when he's in situation without Conley out there. I think he gets a little bit of assist bump. I think he's definitely in play. We could see a solid Jingles night. By the way, our new host, the young lady whose name is escaping me on the new tip-off show that everybody should check out in the afternoons, made a pretty solid Little House on the Prairie reference that nobody got whatsoever. But if she's out there listening, I want her to know that I got it, and I'm sure that EMac got it because we're both very old. So we did get the Laura Ingalls, Joe Ingles comp reference that was made on the tip-off show. Did you guys check that out there? Are you guys watching that show? Let me know in chat. We can talk about something. 3 bombs incoming from Utah. Embiid has real 31 real point number at Sportsbook. Seems like 60 fantasy is in play. Yeah, if Embiid had a 60 fantasy point night against Sacramento, would that surprise me? Not by any means. But that's what we need him to get. So I don't know. He wasn't coming up that much for me. And on FanDuel, like I talked about earlier, I was getting to Vooch just so much more. And he was coming up as getting to his target score so much more. So it just made sense to go to him. A lot more than Embiid, but no, of course I wouldn't be surprised if Embiid had a 60 point night, 60 fantasy point night against Sacramento. Makes total sense. Let's see what else we got. Hit that thumbs up out there. Yeah, everybody misses Fast Eddie, guys. He's a good dude. Talked a lot. Sometimes you lose track of who he was talking about during the shows, but great analysis. Knows basketball. Definitely seemed like a nice guy. I didn't actually know him personally. We didn't cross paths when we worked here, but. Used to play Magic the Gathering with a good friend of mine, which was
small world.
Yeah, very strange. Very small world strange.
All right. So we had 3 beers left. 2 were Bud Light Lime left over from Labor Day. But I chose the Dos Equis. I don't always drink beer, but when I do, I prefer Dos Equis Amber, actually. Stay thirsty, my friends.
The most interesting man in DFS, everybody. I love it.
There we go. Okay. Oof. It's a beer, all right. Fortunately, I think this one's from Labor Day, Thanksgiving, maybe.
But is it like we brought this in and out of the house for
No, it was in our downstairs fridge, so it's been untouched by the light of day since it came home from the store for however long. So
my dad, love my dad, great dude, but has an issue with not caring that beers have gotten warm and then gotten cold again and then gotten warm again and then gotten cold again. He will buy a 12-pack or a case of beer and put it in the cooler and it's Thanksgiving, then it's Christmas, then it's Columbus Day or whatever the next thing that we're home for is. Then it's Easter and we're drinking the same beers. There's a bunch of beers in the cooler over there.
Yeah, well, fortunately, we have one of those downstairs fridges that you fill up after you go to Costco. So in the basement, and then we've got the other one. So there we are. All right, let's look at some. Oh, so key things I wanted to mention. So we got new shows. So I see you guys mentioning Kayla. She is heading up the new show that we're running an hour before normal deep dive time. So most days we're going to go off between 3:45 and 4. That show is going to be focusing kind of more on high level stuff, betting, talking about any injuries, where you want to prepare. That's a show that it's finding its legs. It's going to figure out some stuff. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. But I think we're going to see us talking a little bit more about some of the sports wagering. That's something that's now available here in Virginia. We have the whole Awesemo Odds Shopper and Awesemo Odds, our sister sites that cover all of that. I've been enjoying these little things called boosters. Now I know what they are. Basically what they do is they goose some of the odds a little bit and make it more enticing. Like last night I could bet $25 first score on, or up to $25 and get a 5x return instead of a 2x return on who scored first in the Denver-Milwaukee game. Nice. Being very new, as in 72 hours into my sports wagering career, starting with the Super Bowl on Sunday. I guess I was even barely that, 24 hours. I chose to bet $5, but I won. So nice. It was good. I watched that team. Denver won the tip, worked it around, splashed to 3. It was great. Good times. That probably won't happen. Now I will start to lose.
Anyway, via Slack anyway. I was there for the placing of your first legal bet in the state of Virginia.
That is correct. That is correct.
This occasion, I love it. So did you happen to catch the tip-off show today? I wasn't on it. So
I did not. I have a day job, so I was busy doing that.
Well, I watched all our shows today because I was just hanging out, starting with the 6:30 in the morning show that we'll mention next, but. The reason they were talking about the tip-off in the chat, our new host, Caleb, made a solid reference, I thought, based on a player name from the Utah Jazz to a TV show that was on in the 1980s.
Okay.
Can you guess what it was?
A show that was in the 80s, something with the Jazz. Was it the Jazz mascot or was it a player on the Jazz?
Player on the Jazz.
The 80s. Let's see. Mitchell, Gobert, Ingles, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie.
Done. I knew he would get it. Told you. Look at that. He didn't even, that was not even thought. That was beautiful. See, you got to have the right crowd. That's all.
All right. In the meantime, I've got the late slate ownership here, so we can check this out, and then we'll go down out of here. So we have number 1 on DK. Nikolai Vucevic, 51.2. Number 2, Damian Lillard, 45.2. Number 3, Dwayne Bacon, 39. So there you go, Baby Seals. You're getting 2 of the 3 most popular players. That's going to help you seal off. Baby Seal off. There you go. I'm just on fire tonight. That will help you block anybody coming after you. Cole Anthony, 35. Donovan Mitchell, 34. Frank Mason, 33. Harrison Barnes, 32. Danny Green, 31. Jordan Clarkson, 28. Rudy Gobert, 28. Seth Curry, 26. Joel Embiid, 25. I said we had him 18 or 19 on the last one, so he went up just a tiny bit, but so did Vooch, and I bet that means that and his Cantor is not very high. He is down there at 11%. He is the 4th most popular center. Rudy Gobert actually topped.
Actually, that might be inefficient by the field.
Yeah, Rudy Gobert topped Embiid by a little bit. He's at 28%.
That's interesting too. I would have thought it would have been the other way. I think that's probably a mistake by the field too. Maybe
Aaron
not
Gordon
twice, but I definitely think the Enes Kanter ownership is way low. I would have had him definitely boosted up above that.
Yeah. Aaron Gordon, 0.09. CJ McCollum, 0.07. Mike Conley, 0.06. Jabari Parker, 0.05. Taco Fall, he could play. Michael Carter-Williams, he's not going to play, 0.03. Yusuf Nurkic, 0.02. Nasir Little, 0.02. As they used to say, Evan Fournier, 0.01. Congratulations. You played yourself. 6:30 in the morning, we're starting us off. The Josh Engelman show. That Josh Engelman show got 3,000 views today. I just went and looked that up. That is amazing. That is amazing. He said,
people love seeing behind the scenes. They love seeing the process.
I watched two little things that he mentioned. I watched about 10 minutes of it at lunch, and he already gave me two new websites that I'm going to go look at for looking at things. If you guys want to
obscurely named NBArotations.com.
Indeed they are. If you guys want that, you can go find that in the first 10 minutes of 12 minutes maybe. I only listened for a little bit and I got that one. But you guys can go check that out. Something that's worthwhile. That is my Easter egg gift to you guys.
There you go.
Anything else before we get on out of here?
No, I'm all good. I think a little bit of a day off for me. Look for my columns tomorrow, but I don't think I'm on any shows tomorrow. Maybe I am. Maybe I'll pop up in your lives. Who knows?
All right. Well, with that, again, we're starting it all off at 6:30 in the morning. If you're up early, check it out. But everything's going to be on the Awesemo Podcast Network. That one, I don't know if that one will be because Josh is doing a lot of screen share stuff. But you can just have it on the background and learn a lot of invaluable information on that. And I just want to double check because tomorrow we have Live Before Lock PGA as well tomorrow night, and there will be a late show for the NBA actually every night this week and going forward Monday through Wednesday. As long as there's a game tipping off after at 9 o'clock or later, you're going to get the late show from us. So please come back. We're going to have some fun. We're going to find our legs here, and we're going to hang out and enjoy ourselves.
Do you have YouTube chat up right now?
I closed it.
Stephen Leibowitz might have just given us a decent nickname. He says, thanks, EMac.
There you go. There you go. That works on
guys,
about
we
4
appreciate
different levels.
We appreciate the thumbs up. We appreciate all the thanks and everything. Thank all you guys. We appreciate you just joining us and hanging out with us. It's makes it fun, makes it worthwhile.
All right. With that, gamers, good luck.